Let's welcome Katie Vogel up to the stage, everybody.
Thank you for that lovely introduction, Sean. Ladies and gentlemen, I am happiest when I'm traveling on my bicycle. And I got my first bicycle of my adult life as a 21st birthday present from Nate Kempius. And many miles and many bicycles later, that man became my husband. Yeah, he's pretty great. I know, applause. He's wonderful. Thank you. Good job. Okay. Thank you. Well done, team. I think we're going to work well together. So naturally, our honeymoon consisted of a very sensible and conventional bicycle tour through the former Soviet Union, camping the entire way, not speaking any Russian. This is what we do. And it's life-changing. Traveling on bicycles is life-changing. And so for 5 years, I put in 40,000 miles almost on my custom hand-built, beautiful touring bicycle. Her name was Marjorie Binghamton III. I know, right? We can all vomit now. I'm sorry. So in August 2014, I found myself completely burned out and at the end of my proverbial rope in my nonprofit job in Chicago. And I did what any sensible person facing burnout in a social services situation would do. I planned a 3-week solo bicycle tour from Carbondale, Illinois to Charleston, South Carolina, right? Yeah, that's what you do. It's what you do. And this was not my first rodeo. Clearly, we had done that whole thing through the former Soviet Union. Very sensible, yes. But solo bicycle touring is radical self-sufficiency, and it is fraught, and it's exciting, and it is doing a trapeze act without a net. And like anything worthwhile, it can go horribly wrong. And so for 6 days, I found myself with perfect weather as autumn set in over western Kentucky and central Tennessee. And I traveled up these ridiculous hills as I was going into Appalachia, and people would pull over and slow down as I'm going 4 miles an hour up this hill, carrying 40 pounds of gear on my bicycle, sweating, so much sweating. And they would reach out their window, this happened on several occasions, and hand me, yes, you remember these from kindergarten, those cheesy crackers that are neon orange, and a bottle of water out the window because these people thought I had lost my gourd. And there were tobacco farmers who, putting around on their John Deere tractors up these huge hills alongside of me, would applaud and say, "You've got this, you're doing great." And I was. And then 27.4 miles outside of Nashville, Tennessee, something exploded into me from behind. And I, while still attached to my bicycle, flipped over and landed in a ditch, still attached to my bicycle with many pounds of gear and myself. I'm a very large person, in case you couldn't tell. And so I came to on the side of the road, 27.4 miles outside of Nashville, Tennessee. And I quickly realized 2 things. One, I wasn't dead, because as a nice Jewish girl from Chicago, I found myself aware of the fact that there aren't rubberneckers in central Tennessee. They're Southern Baptists. And so I'm looking, and I know my first responder training is kicking in, and that I cannot move my neck because I can't feel my toes. I can't feel my toes. That's the second thing that I quickly realized. But meanwhile, we're waiting for the ambulance to come, and this extraordinarily kind group of people are standing over me, holding hands, and praying for their sister in Christ. Yes, and you know what? It was one of the kindest things and most beautiful expressions of faith that I have ever encountered. So thank you, non-rubbernecker Southern Baptists in central Tennessee. Good people. And so I knew that I had to move my toes, right? Like that's all I'm thinking, other than like, okay, God has a really hysterical sense of humor. And an hour later in the hospital, doped up on morphine, completely out of my mind, I am suddenly, this pain breaks through and I can feel my toes, but I can also feel my 2 broken ribs and the fact that my shoulder has been dislocated and I've shredded all available ligaments in there, everything. It was just like this beautiful auto wreck in my shoulder. And I knew that I was going to be okay because I could wiggle my toes, but I wasn't, and neither was Marjorie Binghamton III. And the funny thing about trauma is that it's not always terribly visible. And so Marjorie had this tiny, tiny bend in the rear triangle of the bicycle, and it's something you cannot repair. You can't fix it. But really, I thought I was going to be okay. And so a few weeks later, Nate, back to my wonderful husband, he, with 0 fanfare and 0 pressure, brings home a 3-speed bicycle. And bicycling isn't what I do, it's part of who I am. And so I pretend to be very excited, and I take it and I commute to work, which means baldly lying to my husband and riding my bicycle down the block and then putting it on the bus, dissolving into tears, sometimes walking it 2 miles to work. But I'm okay. I'm okay. And I never told anyone that I wasn't okay. Everyone was like, whoa, you got back on your bike. It's awesome. You're so strong. You're great. I know, look at those muscles. And so I faked it for a very long time, and then this last summer my settlement came through from this crash, and it covered my medical bills, and it covered a new hand-built custom touring bicycle named Gertie, because I couldn't do Marjorie Binghamton IV. It turns out it's an obnoxious mouthful. And when Marjorie came in the mail 7, 8 years ago now, it was the best day of my life, other than my wedding, clearly, darling, other than my wedding. And when Gertie came, I had to fake it. I was sitting in the basement of Reeser Bicycle Outfitters over in Newport, and I was just like, oh yeah, my bicycle came, that's great. Like, shit, I'm gonna have to ride it. And so I did, but oftentimes I would fake excuses about having to get on the bus, and I can't go to that meeting with our publisher, like dripping sweat. When really, like a year ago, I would have just been like, of course, I'm here, dripping sweat. It's so nice to see you. In a boardroom. Professionalism, adulting. It's great, isn't it? So I spend the better part of a summer completely faking being okay, occasionally going out for small rides, but generally spending a lot of quality time on the 15 Express. And then our friends made the mistake of getting married in Vermont. And anyone here who's been to Vermont will tell you, because I told them to tell you, that being in Vermont is like being trapped in a postcard. It is so pretty. It's beautiful. Oh my gosh, it's rolling hills and small mountains and these gravel roads, and it's just so disgustingly pretty. It's too much. Vermont is too much. And so, of course, my husband wanted us to take our bicycles, and I said, "Oh no, we don't need to do that. Why would we do that? They could get stolen at a truck stop, or this has never stopped me before. They could get stolen at a truck stop. We're going to be wearing formal attire. We don't need to schlep bicycling gear and formal attire." And Nate vetoed every single excuse and was like, "No, really, we're going to go for a bike ride in the mountains, and it's going to be awesome." And so that's how I found myself at the bottom of a mountain in southern Vermont outside of Brattleboro on a 2-lane road that looked beautiful but turned out to be a logging road frequented by logging trucks. And I had passed a curve really badly. I had taken it very, very poorly, and so I crossed the double yellow into a logging truck's path, Right, I know, it's terrible. And so I make it to the bottom of the hill, and this horrible monster inside of me is bubbling and trying to get out. And we stop. I'm not making this up, at the bottom of the hill, adjacent to a covered bridge, because it's Vermont and it's that aggressively cute. God, Vermont, please stop it. And I lose it. I mean, I lose it. I drop this absurdly expensive bicycle, and my husband immediately goes, what are you doing? And I just start crying, and this horrible secret comes out. It's tearing, it comes, blah! I don't love riding my bicycle anymore. And in our relationship, that's almost tantamount to I don't love you anymore. But thankfully, my husband is a pretty extraordinary human being with a lot of capacity for holding space for all of the feelings that I hold in my tiny body. And he said, that's okay. And he gave me a hug. And then he said, there's no public transit, and we have to get back up the mountain. Yes. And so we sit and we have dinner and we make a plan, and we try very hard to not talk about this really intense meltdown that has just occurred, because feelings, I can share them with you, but myself, too much. And we finish dinner, and Nate has constructed a plan that involves about 25 miles of unpaved single-lane gravel roads going back up the mountain from which we just descended. And gravel is maybe my least favorite surface to ride on. It rattles, it's not steady, it's unpredictable. Oh, and it's getting dark. It's getting really, really dark. And so something happened as we rode through the dusk through aggressively cute Vermont, past honor system farm stands, and past cows that had escaped their pastures, and through these woods that were getting thicker and thicker and thicker, and the stars were coming out, this incredible blanket of stars, and we're going up hills and down hills and up hills and down hills, and Nate is waiting very patiently for me at the bottom of hills so we can trudge back up together. But I am not descending like an adult. I'm descending like my grandmother used to drive. Very slowly, lots of brakes, not going fast. And so it's finally pitch black, and I get to the top of this hill, and I look down, and I think, okay. And I let go of the brakes, and I sail down the hill. And in that moment, I realized that I would eventually be okay, and that I am still happiest when I am traveling by bicycle. Thank you all so much.
Give it up for Katie Vogel, everybody. That was awesome. And she told it literally with the exact same amount of emotion and vigor, like just sitting at a table with her. And I also, my one takeaway from that story is I wish I had a better excuse for why I hate riding my bike up a hill like she does.